to make tough shots. We had some really good time and score execution moments, offensively and defensively.
The question wasn't about the whole team. What do you think of the rally that your team had in the fourth quarter when it comes to Caitlin? She had 5 threes in the fourth quarter. That is unheard of.
A 26-second clip from a post-game press conference has generated more debate across basketball media than almost any play from the game itself. The moment was unremarkable in its setup. A reporter directed a straightforward question at Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White, asking for her reaction to Caitlin Clark's fourth quarter performance. Clark had just scored 17 points in a single quarter, including 5 three-pointers, to pull her team back from what had been an increasingly lopsided deficit. It was a specific question about a specific performance. The answer that followed made no mention of Clark at all. White redirected immediately to the collective: team resilience, execution in the closing minutes, the importance of consistency across the roster. None of that is wrong, and none of it is surprising from a coach conditioned to deflect individual praise in favor of group messaging. But context shapes what a response communicates beyond its words. Clark had not been on a 40-game run of steady, unchallenged production. She had entered this game under sustained public scrutiny following a difficult start to the season, and she had answered that scrutiny in the most direct way a basketball player can, by performing at a high level when her team needed it most. The absence of any acknowledgement from her head coach in that moment did not go unnoticed. To understand why the clip spread as quickly as it did, it helps to trace the arc of pressure Clark has been managing since before this season began. Over a 13-game stretch last year, she spoke publicly about the mental weight of recovering from injury, while maintaining the level of play expected of a player with her profile. The recovery process was prolonged. The scrutiny that accompanied it was not. When the new season opened and Clark struggled through her first 2 games offensively, the commentary that followed was immediate and largely unsparing. Analysts questioned whether her shooting touch had eroded. Comparisons were made to players whose careers had plateaued early. The volume of that criticism, measured by the breadth of platforms carrying it, was considerable. The fourth quarter of this game, then, was not simply a good performance in the statistical sense. Clark scored 17 points in that stretch alone. She hit 5 three-pointers, several from well beyond the arc. With 2 seconds remaining and the game tied, she pulled up from deep and converted, forcing overtime. She finished the night with 30 points and 7 three-pointers. The assists she recorded were, according to observers in attendance, undercounted in the official box score. Taken together, it was the kind of output that, under most circumstances, draws unambiguous praise from the bench. What it drew instead was a press conference answer that contained no reference to the player who produced it. For a portion of the fan base, that omission confirmed a concern that had been building for some time, that the relationship between Clark and White had developed an internal friction that was beginning to show in public. Whether that concern reflects an actual rift or a pattern of coaching philosophy applied without adequate sensitivity to context is a question that cannot be answered from outside the organization. What can be observed is that the response landed poorly, that it spread widely, and that it arrived at a moment when the broader performance of the front office was already drawing criticism from multiple directions. The roster construction entering this season had been a point of contention since the offseason closed. The team added perimeter depth at the expense of frontcourt size, a choice that carried acceptable risk as long as the roster stayed healthy. When Aaliyah Boston sustained an injury during last night's game, that risk became a visible liability. The players available to fill the center position, a combination of inconsistent veterans and rookies still adjusting to the professional level, were not equipped to absorb the loss. Management, when pressed on the frontcourt depth question, acknowledged that elite post players had largely been committed elsewhere in free agency. They did not, however, conduct overseas scouting in any substantive way. The international market for centers, which has expanded significantly under the current collective bargaining structure, was not explored. The reasoning offered for that decision did not address why a market known to produce physically capable, high IQ players at competitive salaries was passed over entirely. That explanation did not satisfy much of the fan base. It reinforced a growing perception that the front office had approached the offseason with insufficient urgency, that the unprecedented attention the franchise had attracted was being managed rather than built upon. The fan investment in this team is not casual. It grew rapidly and, for many, carries a sense of personal connection to what the league has become over the past 2 seasons. When the product on the court raises legitimate questions about roster planning, that investment does not simply absorb the concern, it amplifies it. The team's social media activity during this period has added another layer of friction. Fans tracking the franchise's official accounts have noted a pattern of promotional content centered not on players, but on the coaching staff, specifically on White. The content in question is produced with a level of polish typically associated with player campaigns or franchise milestone celebrations. It is unusual to dedicate that kind of media production to a head coach in only her second season with a team, absent a championship run or some other exceptional on-court milestone. The timing of the campaign, coinciding with mounting public criticism of the team's direction, has not been interpreted charitably by the portions of the fan base already skeptical of team management. An organization that reads and responds to its social media environment, and this front office has given every indication that it does, understands what it is communicating when it shifts promotional resources toward a figure under scrutiny. The intent may be to shore up public confidence. The effect, among an audience already primed to view management decisions with suspicion, tends to be the opposite. It signals defensiveness. It draws attention to the controversy rather than diverting it. Winning basketball games resolves the underlying tension. A well-produced coaching reel does not. The attendance data from last night's game provides a concrete measure of where fan sentiment currently stands. Broadcast cameras during the third quarter captured sections of empty seats in the upper levels of the arena. Fans following the live chat confirmed that the in-arena atmosphere was noticeably diminished compared to earlier in the season and compared to the franchise's peak crowd energy from last year. The parallel that comes up in those conversations is pointed. The period following a high-profile player departure from a Texas-based franchise in the men's league, when the local fan base shifted from enthusiastic to openly hostile, spending the remainder of the season directing sustained chants for the dismissal of the general manager. The comparison is not a prediction. It is an indication of how quickly goodwill can erode when fans believe the organization is not managing its most valuable asset responsibly. The asset in question in this case is not simply a player. Clark's entry into the league preceded a measurable shift in the league's commercial and cultural profile. Attendance figures, TV ratings, and merchandise revenue all rose in connection with her presence in ways the league had not seen before. Protecting that asset, not in a cynical, purely commercial sense, but in the genuine sense of building the conditions under which she performs at her highest level, is among the most consequential responsibilities the Fever's coaching staff and front office carry. The public dimension of that responsibility includes, at minimum, not withholding credit when credit is plainly warranted. There is a well-documented principle in sports leadership around the management of high-profile players. The coaches with the longest records of retaining elite talent consistently operate on a clear separation between private accountability and public advocacy. In private, the standard is high and the feedback is direct. In public, the coach is the first and most emphatic voice of support. That pattern is not accidental. It is a deliberate strategy based on the understanding that a player's confidence is a resource, that it can be depleted, and that the coach's public posture plays a meaningful role in either protecting or eroding it. A player who has just performed at a historically high level, under external pressure in a game her team needed, has done precisely what a coach asks of her. The response from the podium shapes, in part, what that player takes into the next game. Clark entered last night, having absorbed 2 games of public criticism following a slow offensive start to the season. She responded with 30 points, 7 three-pointers, and a shot under pressure that forced overtime. The press conference that followed did not acknowledge any of that. What it acknowledged was the team's collective resilience. The omission may have been instinctive, a reflex toward the group-first language most coaches default to. It may reflect a more deliberate choice about how White manages Clark's public profile. From the outside, neither explanation fully accounts for the optics of the moment, and neither has been offered. What the moment has done, more than anything else, is accelerate a conversation that was already in progress about the alignment between this organization's direction and the expectations of the fan base it has built. Those fans came to this team in large part because of Caitlin Clark. They follow the team's internal dynamics, press conference body language, lineup decisions, and social media output with a level of attention that would have been unusual for this league 2 years ago. They are not an audience that can be redirected with promotional content. They are a fan base that evaluates what they see and draws conclusions from it. The window to address those conclusions remains open, but it is narrowing. The Fever still have the player around whom a successful season can be built. They still have enough of the season remaining to correct the defensive vulnerabilities the Boston injury has exposed. The coaching staff still has the opportunity to demonstrate, in the moments that follow this one, that the press conference clip was an anomaly rather than a pattern. But the conditions required for that correction are more demanding now than they were before last night. The fan base is watching closely. The stakes around Clark's confidence and comfort within this system have been publicly raised, And the margin for further erosion of trust between player and coach, between organization and fans, is measurably smaller basketball. At this level requires internal cohesion to function under pressure. That cohesion is built through dozens of small decisions about communication, about public posture, about how a franchise treats its most recognizable figure in the moments that draw the most scrutiny. Last night offered one of those moments. The decision made in it, or the absence of a decision, is now part of the record. What follows will determine whether it becomes a footnote or a turning point.